The valley was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that made a person hear even the softest shift of wind. The human traveler walked slowly, enjoying the cool air after a long day of moving through rough land. He did not expect anything unusual. He just wanted to reach the next ridge before night fully settled. But as he followed a narrow path between two large stone walls, something caught his eye. There was a shape lying ahead, huge and dark, almost blending with the rocks around it. At first, he thought it was just a fallen boulder or a trick of the fading light. But something about it felt wrong. It was too smooth in some places, too large in others, almost like a living shape collapsed in exhaustion. He slowed his pace. His heartbeat picked up a little, not from fear, but from instinct telling him to pay attention. As he came closer, he noticed a faint movement. Something large and heavy rose and fell, just slightly, like slow breathing. That was when he realized it was not a rock at all. It was a creature, and not a creature he had ever seen before. He stepped carefully, placing his feet where the dirt was soft, so he would not startle whatever lay there. The light of the sinking sun stretched long shadows across the ground. Each step brought him closer to the truth of what he had found. When he reached a safe distance, he knelt and watched. Huge, folded legs, thick and strong, lay pressed against the earth. A wide body covered in thick hair and strange markings, lifted slightly with each troubled breath. And at the front of the creature's face was a long, massive trunk lying limp on the ground, injured and shaking just enough to show that the creature was in pain. His breath caught for a moment. It looked like a mammoth, but not the kind he had ever imagined. Its shape was familiar, but everything about it was also different. The skin had a slight glow in certain patches. The fur was darker, almost violet in the fading light. Its size was astonishingly bigger than any land animal he knew. And the trunk, though shaped like a mammoth's trunk, had patterns running along it like natural lines of light. The creature turned its head just enough to look at him. Its eyes were deep, tired, and full of confusion. But they also held something else, fear mixed with hope, as if it did not know whether this human was a danger or a chance for help. The human raised his hands slowly to show he meant no harm. He spoke softly, not knowing if the creature understood, but hoping his tone would carry comfort. "It's all right. I am not here to hurt you." The creature responded with a low, shaking rumble. It was not loud or threatening. It sounded more like a cry held inside for too long. The human felt a pull in his chest at the sadness in that sound. Whatever happened to this being, it had not been easy. He scanned the ground around the creature. There were deep footprints leading away, but not human footprints. These tracks were wider, oddly shaped, and spaced far apart. There were also strange marks in the dirt, like lines left by something that floated rather than rolled. Small metal fragments caught the last bits of sunlight. They shimmered in a way normal metal did not. He picked one up and felt a soft warmth in it, as if it had been part of something active only moments ago. He looked back at the creature. Its trunk had a long burn-like wound along the side, still fresh. The edges glowed slightly, a color he had never seen in any natural injury. It looked like some kind of advanced tool or energy had caused it. The creature must have tried to follow the others who left these tracks, but with the injured trunk, it probably fell behind until it collapsed. The human understood then. The creature had not simply been left, it had been abandoned. Whoever it traveled with, they were not coming back for it. He felt a wave of sadness and disbelief. Even if they were not human, who would leave something this large and gentle behind in such pain? He looked into its eyes again. The creature blinked slowly, as if unsure whether to trust him. The human moved closer, just a little, checking if the creature reacted with fear. It did not lift its head or pull away. It seemed too weak to move much at all. He reached into his pack and pulled out his water flask. He held it toward the creature, still keeping his movements slow and calm. The creature watched the flask closely, its eyes shifting from the flask to the human's face. Then, with a slow and heavy motion, it lifted the tip of its injured trunk toward the water. The movement made the creature flinch in pain, and it let out a soft groan. But it continued, guided by hope more than comfort. The human uncapped the flask and poured water carefully into the hollow end of the trunk. The creature drank, though. Its breath shuddered with each swallow. When it finished, it rested its trunk softly on the ground again. The human noticed its breathing ease a little, though the wound still pulsed with pain. He spoke again, keeping his voice low and steady. "I don't know who you are, or where you came from, but I can try to help." The creature stared at him, as if trying to understand his intentions. It blinked again, slower this time, like a tired acceptance. The human reached out his hand, not touching the creature yet, but letting it see that he was willing. The creature leaned its head just slightly toward him, a small but meaningful gesture. That was enough permission for him to step closer. He inspected the wound on the trunk more carefully. The burned area was deep, but not hopeless. The edges were hot to the touch, almost as if the injury was made by something far beyond normal fire or heat. He realized he needed to cool it and clean it, at least enough to stop the pain from spreading. He checked his pack again. He had cloth, a small amount of clean water, and simple herbs he used on long trips. Nothing advanced, nothing special. But it was all he could offer. He soaked the cloth with water and wrung it out gently. Then, with the slowest movement he could manage, he pressed it lightly against the edge of the wound. The creature tensed. Its huge body shivered, its breath quick and uneven. The human whispered, "I know it hurts. I'm sorry. I just want to help." The creature stayed tense for a moment, then slowly relaxed. It understood he was trying to ease the pain, not add to it. He continued cooling the wound, carefully wiping away dust and dirt. Each small motion made the creature breathe differently, but gradually its trembling eased. The ground under them grew darker with the shadow of the night, but he kept working. He could not leave it like this, not after seeing the fear and loneliness in its eyes. Once the wound was cleaned, as best as he could manage, he stepped back. The creature looked stronger, though still exhausted. He wondered how long it had been lying there alone, waiting for someone who never returned. He sat beside it, watching the sky darken and stars appear one by one. The creature looked at the stars too, as if recognizing them, maybe even remembering where it truly belonged. The human stayed close, not touching the creature unless needed, but letting it know it was not alone anymore. The quiet valley felt different now. It was no longer empty. It held a moment that neither of them had expected a moment, where a human and an alien creature met not as enemies or threats, but as two beings needing understanding. He knew this was only the beginning. But for now, the night felt calm. The creature breathed easier, and the human made a silent promise in his heart that he would not abandon it the way others had. The night passed slowly, but the human stayed awake, checking the creature every now and then. When the first light of morning reached the valley, he finally stood up and stretched his tired arms. The creature was still lying there, but something in its breathing sounded a little calmer than yesterday. The air was cool and soft, carrying the faint smell of sand and dry grass. Birds were calling from far away, but even their sound felt gentle compared to the heavy silence around them. He walked a few steps around the creature, wanting to understand more about what had happened. The ground held many clues, and he knew if he looked carefully, he could piece together the story of why this huge animal was left here alone. The Earth was disturbed in a wide circle around the mammoth, as if something large had landed there. The shape didn't look like any vehicle made by humans. There were strange curved burns on the ground that looked like the marks left by something, with heat far higher than normal engines. A little further away, he found deep footprints that didn't match the creature. These prints were sharper, almost claw-like, as if made by beings who walked differently than humans. Some were close together, some far apart, showing they moved in a hurry. He crouched down and traced one with his fingers. The lines were deep. Whatever made them must have been heavy or very strong. There were also pieces of metal scattered around. They were not rusted or broken from age. They looked like they belonged to something advanced, tools or parts of equipment. They had smooth edges and a faint glow inside, like they held a memory of the energy that once powered them. The human picked one up and turned it gently between his fingers. The warmth inside had faded overnight, but it still felt strange, almost alive. He placed the metal piece back on the ground and looked toward the creature. It lifted its head just a little and watched him. Its eyes were deep and dark, but there was a softness in them that hadn't been there the night before. Maybe it recognized him now. Maybe it understood he was trying to help. The human walked back toward it, speaking softly. "I'm just looking around, trying to understand what happened to you." He knew the creature couldn't speak back, but he kept talking anyway. Talking helped calm them both. When he got close enough, he checked the wound again. The burn. Mark was still glowing faintly along the edges, the same strange color he had seen last night. But it seemed slightly better. At least the swelling had not grown worse. The creature let out a low rumble as he leaned forward to look. It wasn't a sound of fear, more like discomfort and trust mixed together, as if saying, "I know you. Mean well, but it still hurts." He nodded to himself and gently placed his hand near the wound, not touching it yet. "I'll be careful," he whispered. He saw dried dirt stuck in some of the cracks of the trunk, which meant the creature had fallen hard before he found it. Maybe it tried to keep up with the others, but collapsed again and again until it couldn't move anymore. He imagined that moment the creature calling out, the others moving further away, their strange steps echoing across the valley, and then silence. It was a heavy thought. Being left alone like that, especially while injured, must have been terrifying. The human took a deep breath and decided to look even wider around the valley. If the aliens who traveled with this creature had left recently, there might be more signs nearby. He didn't move too far, only enough to check the edges of the area, and that was when he saw more disturbing details. There were grooves in the dirt, long and curved, as if a craft lifted off fast. The direction of the grooves pointed toward the sky, meaning whatever left here didn't just walk away, it flew away. The uneven depth of the marks showed they took off quickly, maybe even in a panic. He walked along the path of the marks, following them for a few meters. Eventually, the ground smoothed out again, and there was nothing left to trace. They were gone, truly gone. When he turned back toward the creature, it was watching him with large, sad eyes. There was no anger in them, but there was a heavy sadness, something that spoke without words. "They left me." The human felt a painful twist in his chest. He knew that feeling too well, the feeling of being left behind, of being forgotten by those who were supposed to stay. That silent understanding connected them in a way no language could. He walked back and knelt beside the creature. "I saw where they went," he said gently. "They took off fast. They might not be coming back." The creature closed its eyes, as if accepting something it already knew, but didn't want to believe. It lowered its head slowly, and its huge body let out a long breath that sounded like a quiet sigh. The human reached out his hand and rested it near the trunk, close enough for comfort, but not so close as to hurt. The creature shifted slightly and rested part of its trunk near his hand, not touching, but letting him know it found comfort in the closeness. He stayed there with it for a while. No words were needed, just quiet presence. The morning sun grew warmer, chasing away the chill of the night. Light spread across the valley, revealing the full size of the creature. It was magnificent even. In its weakened state, every muscle large and powerful, every line of its body shaped by strength, and yet now lying helpless on the dry ground. After sitting with it long enough, the human decided to check if the creature could move at all. He stood and stepped a little toward the creature's side. "Can you get up?" he asked softly. He gestured with his hands, showing the motion of rising. The creature gave a weak rumble, then tried. Its front legs shifted, pressing into the ground. Its huge body quivered with effort. The trunk twitched, painfully, almost stopping it from continuing. But the creature didn't give up. It tried again, its legs trembling under its enormous weight. The human stepped closer, speaking calmly, encouragingly. "Slowly, you can do it." After a long struggle, the creature lifted its head and shoulders off the ground, but that was all it could manage. The effort drained it completely. It collapsed back down with a heavy thud that sent dust into the air. The human hurried forward and placed his hands on the creature's side, not to hold it up, but to let it know he was there. "It's all right," he whispered. "You don't have to rush. We'll take it slowly." The creature breathed heavily, for a moment, then relaxed again. It seemed grateful for the patience, grateful it didn't have to fight alone anymore. The human stood up and looked around again. If he was going to help the creature survive, he needed to plan. The mammoth needed shelter from the sun, water, and maybe even food. Its wound needed better cleaning and protection. This was no small task. He was only one person, and this creature was massive. But something inside him refused to walk away. He remembered how it looked at him last night, afraid, weak, alone, and how it trusted him this morning, even with all that pain in its trunk. That trust felt heavy but important. He could not betray it. He gathered what little wood and old dry grass he could find to make some shade. It wasn't much, barely enough to block a portion of the sun, but it was a start. The creature watched him build it, its eyes following every movement. When he finally stood back and wiped sweat from his forehead, the creature lifted its head, a little, as if acknowledging the effort. He smiled slightly. "I'll make it better later. This is just for now." He brought more water, letting the creature drink slowly. He cleaned the wound again, even more gently than before. Each step he took, each small action, made the creature trust him more. And with each moment spent by its side, the human felt more determined. By midday, he understood the truth more clearly. This creature had not just been left behind, it had been abandoned in fear. The aliens must have believed it would slow them down, or they panicked when it got hurt. Whatever the reason they chose, to leave it instead of helping. And now, the duty to help it had fallen on him alone. He placed a hand on its thick fur and whispered, "You're not alone anymore. I'm here. I won't leave you." The creature opened its eyes, looked at him deeply, and let out a low rumble that sounded like gratitude mixed with relief. The valley was still quiet, but now, instead of feeling empty, it felt like the beginning of something important, something neither the human nor the creature had expected, but both needed more than they realized. The human had spent the entire morning helping the creature, and now it was resting more comfortably under the small shade he had built. Its heavy breathing had slowed, and the trembling in its trunk was less frequent. But he knew this was only the beginning. The wound still needed care, and the creature's strength was far from recovered. He sat beside it for a while, thinking about what he could do next. He didn't have much, just simple supplies, and whatever he could find in the valley. But he refused to give up. If he could not provide advanced tools or medicine, he could at least offer patience, attention, and careful effort. He examined the wound more closely, noticing dried dirt along the edges. He wet a cloth again and gently wiped away the particles. The creature flinched slightly at first, but the human spoke softly and kept his hands steady. "It's all right. I'm not going to hurt you," he said, watching its eyes. Gradually, the creature relaxed enough to let him continue. He repeated the process slowly, giving it time to adjust and breathe between each movement. Each careful action seemed to calm the mammoth further, and its eyes followed him with a quiet trust he had never expected from a wild or abandoned creature. Once the wound was clean, he tore a piece of cloth from his own shirt and wrapped it lightly around the trunk. It was crude and simple, but it would protect the injury from dust and help keep it from drying out too quickly. The creature looked at him, almost as if trying to communicate its approval. It lowered its trunk closer to him and stayed still, letting him adjust the cloth. That small gesture filled the human with determination. This creature depended entirely on him, and he would not let it down. He decided it was time to see if it could stand or move a little. Slowly, he spoke to it again, moving in front of it so the creature could see him clearly. "Can you try to get up? Just a little. Take it slowly. I will be right here." He spread his arms slightly, showing support. The mammoth lifted its head and then tried to push with its front legs. Its body shivered, and its trunk bent awkwardly, causing it pain. But the human remained calm. He whispered words of encouragement and stayed close, letting it feel his presence. After several attempts, the creature managed to raise its shoulders and lift its trunk slightly. The human placed a steady hand near its side, not to push or pull, but just as reassurance. The mammoth leaned a little toward him, almost as if to say, "I am trying. Don't leave me." The effort exhausted the creature quickly, and it collapsed back onto the ground. The human remained with it, rubbing a patch of its thick fur gently. "Rest," he murmured. "We'll try again soon." It seemed to understand, breathing slowly and easing into the dirt, trusting him to stay. After a short rest, the human decided to search the area for anything useful. He didn't have much to offer the creature, and he wanted to make it as comfortable as possible. Walking carefully around the valley, he found dry branches, a few leaves, and some soft grass. He returned to the creature and arranged them around it to make a slightly more comfortable surface to lie on. He also constructed a small makeshift windbreak, using stones to protect it from sudden gusts. Every little action, though simple, seemed to strengthen the bond between them. The mammoth shifted slightly closer to him as he worked, showing that it felt safe in his presence. The human thought about food and water next. He had some water left in his pack, which he offered in small amounts. The creature drank slowly, mindful of its injury, but each sip seemed to give it a little more energy. Then he thought about food. There was some wild grass nearby, not much, but enough to help it feel less empty. He gathered it carefully and laid it near the creature's head. It sniffed the grass and took a few tentative bites, letting the human watch without fear. The sight brought a sense of relief. Even small victories felt important in this situation. The day grew warmer, and the sun climbed higher into the sky. The human realized the mammoth would need shade, so he rearranged the small shelter, using more branches to block the direct sunlight. The creature shifted under the shelter, lowering its massive head, and rested. The human sat beside it, observing its breathing and occasionally murmuring encouragement. The creature seemed to sense his presence as a steady force, a promise that he would not abandon it. Time passed slowly in the valley. The human reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. He had never expected to encounter such a creature, let alone care for it. Yet, as he watched it breathe and rest, he realized that it was not the first time he had faced challenges in life. Helping this creature was just another moment that required patience, resilience, and compassion. He found a strange comfort in the responsibility. Suddenly, he noticed movement on the ridge above. At first, it was faint, just shadows dancing among the rocks. But as he watched more closely, he saw signs of others, perhaps animals or something else, moving cautiously along the top of the ridge. He froze for a moment, not wanting to startle the mammoth or bring any danger near it. The creature lifted its head slightly, alert and curious. The human whispered, "It's all right. Stay calm." He observed quietly, making sure the creature felt secure. The movement passed without incident. Nothing came closer, and the valley returned to its quiet state. The human felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that the valley was full of unseen dangers, but for now, the mammoth was safe under his care. He resolved to remain vigilant, knowing that every small effort counted. As the day wore on, he noticed subtle changes in the creature. Its trunk, though still injured, seemed a little stronger. Its breathing was steadier, and its eyes, once filled with fear, now held faint curiosity. He realized that his care, attention, and patience were starting to make a difference. The creature was beginning to trust him more, recognizing him as someone who would not leave it alone. The human stayed close, resting in the shade beside it. He spoke softly, telling it about simple things, the sounds of the wind, the patterns of the clouds, even the birds flying in the distance. He didn't know if the creature understood the words, but the tone and calm presence mattered. It seemed to respond to the human's voice, occasionally rumbling softly or shifting closer. Night approached again, and the air grew cooler. The human made sure the makeshift shelter would provide some warmth and comfort. He stayed awake most of the night, alert to any movement, any sign of danger. The mammoth, though exhausted, slept more peacefully than the first night. He watched over it, knowing that vigilance was just as important as care. By the end of the second day, the human understood something very important. This creature was not only dependent on him for survival, but it was also teaching him patience, humility, and the meaning of true compassion. The bond between them was growing, quiet and steady, built on trust and shared experience. And he knew that, no matter what challenges came next, he would face them with the same determination, because he could not, and would not, abandon the mammoth now. This part of the story ended with the valley quiet once more, but with a sense of hope and growing connection. The creature rested more comfortably, and the human prepared for the next steps in their journey together, knowing that the bond they were forming would guide them both through the challenges ahead. The morning broke softly over the valley, the sunlight spreading across the rocks and dry grass. The human woke early, as he always did now, watching over the mammoth. The night had been calm, but he knew that the creature's strength was still fragile. Its breathing was steadier, and the trunk trembled less, but the deep burn wound along the side remained a serious problem. Every time the mammoth shifted, the human saw the pain in its eyes. It was a constant reminder that care and attention could not be hurried. He sat beside it for a long moment, simply observing. The creature had shifted slightly during the night, moving closer to him as if instinctively seeking comfort. Its large eyes followed his every move, studying him, trying to understand if he would leave or stay. The human reached out a hand, not touching, just letting it see his presence. Slowly, the mammoth leaned its head toward him, a gesture of quiet trust. He whispered softly, "We'll get through this, one step at a time." He realized that while he could offer immediate care for the wound, the mammoth would need more than temporary relief. Its body needed strength, nourishment, and protection from the harsh sun and winds. Looking around the valley, he searched for anything useful. There were small patches of grass and bushes, nothing like a farm, but enough to start. He collected what he could carry and returned to the mammoth, laying the food gently nearby. The creature sniffed cautiously, then slowly began to eat. Each bite seemed to restore a little energy. Water was the next concern. The human refilled a small container from a nearby stream, careful not to let the creature strain itself while drinking. He guided the trunk gently toward the water, speaking softly to calm it. The mammoth's first attempts were slow and shaky, but with patience, it finally drank, the liquid giving it visible relief. The human watched carefully, feeling a sense of quiet accomplishment. Each small act of care mattered more than anything else in the world right now. After the creature had rested a little and eaten, the human thought it was time to check the wound again. The burn was still serious, but cleaning it carefully each day seemed to prevent infection and ease some pain. He soaked a cloth, wrung it gently, and applied it to the injured area. The mammoth flinched, as it always did, but did not pull away. It seemed to understand that this was necessary. Every moment of contact now was an act of trust. He adjusted the makeshift bandage, wrapping it loosely so that it protected the wound, but did not restrict movement. The creature stayed still, allowing him to work, and at one point it even nudged his hand slightly with its trunk. The human smiled faintly. That small gesture was more than acknowledgement. It was gratitude and perhaps even affection. The bond between them was growing stronger with every act of care and attention. As the day grew warmer, the human began to think about long-term comfort. He collected more branches and leaves to improve the shade and constructed a slightly larger shelter. It wasn't perfect, but it gave the mammoth enough relief from the sun to rest comfortably. He even tried to create a small barrier around the area to reduce the chance of wild animals approaching. Everything he did was slow and deliberate, but necessary. He knew the mammoth's body was healing, but it was still vulnerable. Sitting back after the work, he watched the creature move its trunk experimentally, testing its strength. Each movement was careful, deliberate, and slow, but it was progress. The human encouraged it softly. "That's good. Take it slow. You're getting stronger." The mammoth made low rumbling sounds, almost like a reply. The human smiled. He had no idea what the sound meant, but it felt like communication, a shared understanding that words weren't necessary. The afternoon brought a gentle breeze, and the human noticed the mammoth's breathing became lighter. It even shifted to lie partially in the shade, avoiding the direct heat. He sat nearby, letting it rest while he kept watch. Hours passed in quiet companionship. He spoke occasionally, telling stories about simple things, birds in the trees, clouds in the sky, and distant hills. He didn't know if the mammoth understood, but the rhythm of his voice seemed to calm it. He felt that in this silence they were learning from each other, understanding each other in ways words could never convey. Later, he considered trying to help the mammoth stand again, but this time he knew he needed to be extra patient. The creature had gained some strength overnight, but pushing it too hard could cause injury or fear. He moved closer, crouching to show he was ready to help. "We'll try slowly," he whispered. The mammoth lifted its head and tested its front legs. The human guided it gently, placing a steady hand near the shoulder for reassurance. Step by step, the mammoth lifted itself higher. Its trunk shook slightly, but it didn't stop. After several moments, it managed to push itself onto all four legs, wobbling but standing. The human stepped back slightly, giving it space but staying nearby. The mammoth stayed upright, swaying gently as it adjusted to the weight on its legs. Its trunk moved cautiously, testing the strength of its muscles. The human spoke encouragingly. "Good job. That's it. You're standing." The creature let out a soft, satisfied rumble, and the human felt a rush of pride and relief. It was a small victory, but in this situation, it felt enormous. Once it rested on its feet for a while, he noticed something else. The mammoth seemed aware of its surroundings again. Its eyes scanned the valley, watching for movement. The human realized that the creature had begun to regain confidence, no longer fully trapped in fear. He stayed close, moving slowly to show no threat. Every gesture was careful, deliberate, and respectful of the mammoth's condition. As the sun started to lower toward the horizon, the human gathered some more soft grass and branches for the night. He adjusted the shelter, making it more comfortable and providing additional cover. The mammoth settled under it, lowering its trunk and resting its massive body. The human sat beside it, exhausted but satisfied. The trust they had built over the past days was growing into a quiet understanding, a connection neither of them had expected, but both needed deeply. Night fell again, bringing cool air and stars scattered across the sky. The human remained awake most of the night, keeping watch over the creature. He had learned to notice the slightest movements, the smallest changes in breathing. Every time the mammoth shifted or groaned softly, he was there, offering comfort with his presence. The valley was peaceful, but he knew danger could appear without warning. Vigilance was as important as care. Throughout the night, the mammoth slept more deeply than before. Its trunk twitched occasionally, but it no longer shook uncontrollably. The human felt a sense of relief. He realized that this creature's recovery would not be easy, but every small improvement, every moment of calm, was proof that care and patience worked out. By the end of the fourth day, the human understood more clearly that helping the mammoth was not just about physical care. It was about presence, trust, and respect. It was about showing that someone, even a human, could be reliable and compassionate in a world that often abandoned the weak or injured. He whispered to the creature one last time before resting, "We're getting there. We'll get through this together." The mammoth made a low rumble, its eyes half closed in rest. The human smiled softly, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The night was calm, the valley quiet, but their bond had grown stronger with every careful step, every patient action, and every moment shared in silence. It was a connection neither of them had chosen, but one that was becoming unbreakable. The valley was calm that morning, with a gentle wind rustling through the dry grass. The human had been by the mammoth's side since before sunrise, making sure it was comfortable and that its wound had not worsened during the night. Each day brought progress, however small, and he could see the creature's strength slowly returning. Its trunk, once trembling constantly, now moved with more control, testing its own power. The human watched with quiet pride, knowing this recovery was the result of patience, care, and trust built between them. As he moved closer, the mammoth lifted its head slightly and looked at him, its eyes alert and curious. The human crouched down, speaking softly to it. "Today we try something new. Not too much, just small steps." He could sense the creature's readiness. Its breathing was steadier, and its massive legs no longer shook with the weight of pain. This day could be important. He began by encouraging the mammoth to stand fully, not just to lift its shoulders, but to move a few steps forward. The creature hesitated at first, shifting its weight from one leg to another. The human stayed near, placing a steady hand close by, signaling support without forcing it. Slowly, the mammoth rose, its trunk lifting slightly to balance. The first steps were unsteady, and it swayed awkwardly, but the human whispered encouragement, guiding it without touching too much. "You're doing well. Take it slow. We'll go one step at a time." After several careful movements, the mammoth took a few more steps, leaning on its massive legs with more confidence than before. Each step seemed to strengthen not just its body, but also its trust in the human. He smiled faintly, feeling a wave of relief. This was more than physical progress. It was a breakthrough in their bond. The mammoth looked back at him, its eyes seeming to say, "I'm trying. Don't leave me." The human responded with a quiet nod, a promise that he would never abandon it. Once the creature had rested after walking, the human thought about food and water again. The mammoth had eaten grass the day before, but its body needed more nourishment to regain full strength. He collected additional patches of grass and some roots he had found nearby, arranging them carefully near the creature's head. The mammoth sniffed, then began to eat slowly, savoring the small meal. The human watched closely, making sure it consumed enough without straining itself. Water followed, offered in small amounts to prevent discomfort or choking. While the mammoth rested, the human examined the wound once more. He noticed that the edges, though still injured, were no longer as raw. Cleaning it gently, he applied a fresh layer of cloth for protection. The creature flinched at the touch initially, but after a moment, it allowed the human to continue. These repeated acts of care, day after day, were strengthening not just its body, but the trust between them. As the afternoon passed, the human thought about the valley and the possibility of danger. It had been quiet for days, but the valley was wide and exposed. Predators or other threats could appear at any moment. He decided to make the area safer, moving stones and creating small barriers around the mammoth's resting spot. He was careful not to crowd the creature, allowing enough space for movement, while also providing protection. Each action was deliberate, ensuring comfort and safety at the same time. The mammoth observed the human silently as he worked. It shifted its massive head slightly and made soft rumbles, as if acknowledging the effort. The human paused and spoke softly. "We're making this better for you. I promise." The creature lowered its trunk toward him, a subtle gesture of acceptance. He smiled, feeling the growing connection between them. Later, he encouraged the mammoth to take a few more steps, further than before. This time, it moved with greater confidence, adjusting its balance more naturally. Each movement was measured, careful, yet stronger than the day before. The human remained beside it, offering encouragement and ensuring no sudden movements would cause pain. Step by step, the mammoth regained strength in its legs and trunk, learning to trust its own power again. The day grew warmer, and the human made sure the small shelter continued to provide shade. He adjusted branches, added leaves, and rearranged stones to improve protection. The mammoth moved beneath the cover and rested, its breathing calm. The human sat nearby, observing it and speaking softly, maintaining a steady presence. Every sound, every gesture was meant to reassure the creature that it was not alone. In the late afternoon, the human noticed a faint noise on the ridge above. At first, he thought it was wind or shifting rocks, but the mammoth's ears twitched, and its head turned slightly. They watched together, alert and cautious. Shadows moved across the rocks, but nothing came close. The human whispered, "It's all right. Nothing will harm you while I'm here." The mammoth seemed to understand, lowering its head and relaxing slightly. As the sun began to sink, the human prepared for the evening. He gathered more grass and soft materials to improve the mammoth's resting area for the night. The creature settled beneath the shelter, lowering its trunk and lying down slowly. The human remained beside it, offering water and speaking softly. He noticed subtle changes in the mammoth. Its eyes were calmer, its breathing steadier, and its trunk moved with more control. Small signs, but important milestones. The night came quietly, stars filling the sky above the valley. The human stayed, awake, keeping watch over the mammoth. Each time the creature moved or stirred, he was there, speaking softly or offering comfort with his presence. The valley was silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves and distant calls of birds. He realized that these nights of vigilance were just as important as the daytime care. Safety and trust went hand in hand. Throughout the night, the mammoth slept more soundly than before, its trunk occasionally twitching, but no longer shaking uncontrollably. The human felt relief and quiet pride. He knew that recovery would be slow, but these small steps were building a foundation for the creature's strength and confidence. The bond they had developed over days of care was now strong, unspoken, and mutual. By the end of the 5th day, the human felt a deep sense of responsibility and connection. The mammoth was no longer entirely dependent, but it still needed his guidance and reassurance. The human realized that his presence alone was making a difference, providing comfort, safety, and trust. He whispered softly to the mammoth, "We're getting there. Soon you will be stronger, and we'll face whatever comes together." The mammoth responded with a low rumble, a sound the human had come to understand as agreement and gratitude. The valley was quiet once more, but the trust between them had grown into something permanent. Each careful step, each moment of patience, each act of quiet care had transformed fear into connection, weakness into hope, and abandonment into companionship. The human and the mammoth faced the coming days together, ready to continue the journey of healing, trust, and recovery.